The world's been hard on us. Hard on him. Joel's done some terrible things. He tells me that on this journey, you either hang on to your morals and die, or do whatever it takes to survive. Guess I'll find out.
Welcome back to Retro Rebound. In today's video, we are going back to one depressing video game, man. We are talking about The Last of Us because the new show comes out today on HBO and your boy's gonna watch it today and probably get the rest over it again. This video is brought to you by HelloFresh. You've got New Year's goals and HelloFresh is here to help you achieve them. It's time to skip the grocery store and take control of your time and budget with delicious recipes delivered right to your door. Now, HelloFresh sent me a ton of ingredients, a ton of recipes. There are over 35 weekly recipes. I picked out the turkey stir-fry tacos and I got to cooking. Now, I was making this for my dad. For those who don't know, I'm vegetarian, so I made a chickpea version of this as well. And I gotta be honest, at times I'm a little skeptical of these services, but this was a fast and fresh recipe. Now, HelloFresh's latest line of meals features robust flavors and filling portions that are ready in less than 15 minutes. To me, this is what stood out. It was quick, it was easy, it's letting me achieve my New Year's goal of cooking a lot more for myself, and I gotta emphasize again, this tasted so good, I threw it right in the recipe book. I absolutely adored it. So what you need to do is go to HelloFresh.com and use the code Rebound21 for 21 free meals plus free shipping. Again, that is HelloFresh.com. Use the code Rebound21 for 21 free meals plus free shipping. Take it from me, I took a good bite of this. I was like, oh my God, this is so unreasonably good. So give it a shot. Thank me later and start taking back some of your time and budget today. This is a game that I have not played since the 2013 launch on PlayStation 3. And that's strange because I would easily say The Last of Us is in my top 30 games of all time. I think this thing is nothing short of a masterpiece. So that may confuse you. It's a masterpiece. It's one of your favorites of all time. Why haven't you played it in so long? I mean, I just have great memories built into this game. And I think it's because over time, a lot of the conversation on The Last of Us has soured gradually. And I think that's what made me detach from it more and more, where anytime there was a technical incentive to return the remaster, the PS5 remake, I just didn't want to dip back in. I just loved my memories of the original experience, and that was it. So, of course, The Last of Us Part 2's discourse speaks for itself. It's become more and more sour, which is why I think it's fair to ask the question today, is The Last of Us really that good? And absolutely, I'd say so. And I hope I can show so in this video. Now, before we go any further into our usual introductory video segment, I've committed the cardinal sin here on Retro Rebound. I'm sorry to say, but there is no complete box experience today. You can blame Locke, all right? This is all his fault. It's not mine. It's all his fault. I'm kidding. So what happened was pretty much we had a different video plan for today. Then Locke had this really great idea, like, wait, the new show's coming out, and we always synchronize the shows and the games, the movies and the games. Like, why don't we do something for The Last of Us? I was like, you're a genius, Locke. Like, yes, but, I don't have the PS3 box. But I figured, you know what? We're not going to let that define what cool stuff we can do here. We always wanted to be a part of our formula, but I apologize, it's not here today. It was a 2013 game. I'm going to go out on a limb and say there probably wasn't even much of a manual there, but I understand it is an important part of our channel, so I apologize. You can go ahead and flame me in the comments down below. I'll allow it. But with that, ladies and gentlemen, if you are new here and you're interested in nostalgic and retrospective content, you are in the right place. Consider subscribing. Now, let's talk about one depressing video game. For me, the introduction to a video game, maybe I wouldn't say is everything, but it's so crucial to defining the tone of your game. Like, I've had games that I really love that, I don't want to say stumble out of the gate, but they come out really slow and build over time. Some intros play with your expectations. Where you start is not where you're going to end up, and so on and so forth. Some intros start off in the middle of the game and then go back to the beginning to kind of lead up to that point and then go beyond it. There are so many different techniques, but I think what The Last of Us does so well is something that I think of Fallout 3 with, and Fallout 3 is my favorite video game intro of all time. Hands down, bar none, God tier intro, right? So when it comes to The Last of Us, it captures a lot of that. And what themes are those? It captures, I'd say, the greed of humanity, the selfishness of humanity, the downfall of humanity. And you're going to see a lot of those parallels here in this video to Fallout 3 for me. I just can't help but think of that game. Like, for example, the Fallout universe would not exist without the greed of humanity, because in Fallout, there's this thing called the resource wars, and everyone's going for the last remaining resources on Earth, and the United States eventually ends up annexing Canada, right? And this is all pushed forward by underlying greed. Now, in The Last of Us, and we'll talk about it, I'd say more deeper in the video, is a lot of it is about the selfishness of mankind, right? From top to bottom, it's all self-serving decisions to just make it to the next day, from just shooting some random dude in the head to, I'd say, the finale of the game, which we'll talk about in more spoilery form later in the video. So for those of you who want to tab out, you can watch for as much as you want here. But to me, those are the themes that are captured in The Last of Us. And so when it's captured so wonderfully, it sets up the rest of the game. What I mean by that is the game starts off on a peaceful note, right? You have Joel, you have his daughter hanging out together, enjoying a calm moment. Sometimes simple is effective. I think complex, longer scripts are totally fine, but sometimes in a cinematic game like this, you know, you're used to everything moving, getting control as soon as possible. So there's an expectation that scenes are a little faster moving and that you can get the picture a little quicker. And so that is exactly what happens here. You understand their relationship, the watch is there, the appreciation is there. It's all laid down perfectly. And then in the middle of the night, you see an explosion through the window. You know something's wrong. You hear some faint screaming, a dog yipping on the other side of the backyard, and you're like, what's going on? And suddenly Joel plows through the backyard door, and he is covered in blood. You're like, something's going wrong here. And I love this buildup, especially because I have some key memories tied to it. When I played The Last of Us for the first time ever on PS3, I picked it up with a buddy at a midnight launch, and what we always did when we were really hyped for a game is, like, I'd stay over his house for a couple of days. I'd set up my TV and my console. He'd set up his TV, his console. It's his house, so it was already set up. You get the point, though. And we would just play all night together. And it was such a great time. And so we did that for The Last of Us. So my first full playthrough was just us going back and forth and having those holy smokes moments together. And then I did a separate playthrough by myself at my own house. And I actually tried to hunt down all the trophies in this game. I messed up on one. Usually that's a sign that that'll bother me, but I knew I loved it because I didn't care. I was like, I got to experience greatness again. That was amazing. Back on track though, we're in this introductory phase of the game, and you can see things slowly ramping up, right? You're watching cars blow up. You're watching people kill each other. It's clearly everything's going south, right? And I think the reason it captured me so well is the plausibility of the events going on, right? So the cordyceps are what the clickers are built off of, what the entire outbreak day is built around here in The Last of Us. And again, back to Fallout, it kind of reminds me of the Great War, where I don't think it will ever happen, but just given, again, in the case of The Last of Us, the selfishness of man, or in the case of Fallout, the greed of mankind, I can almost believe these things would happen and the reaction by humanity would be as such. And so capturing that so expertly really lifts the game up. But the moment that really kicks things off is what sets Joel on his path, and it's a very unfortunate one. It's a scene that actually, when I went back to, I was surprised because it made me cry, man. Like, I was, you know, I knew it was going to be sad when Joel's daughter passed, but, you know, as you get older, because I remember being really sad about it when I was in high school when I played this for the first time, but, you know, as you get older, the life becomes more and more precious, and especially when someone's so young, the way they capture it, and she's like crying while it's happening, it's like, she's suffering, man. Like, she's suffering. There's nothing they can do. Every option around them has gone south. And it's not that it should be ceremonious for such a young girl, but it's unceremonious. It's just a random soldier who gets killed in a heartbeat. There's no revenge build up. Like, just boom, dead. That's it. I mean, everything about it was done perfectly. And you see the 20-year leap then. So you now know Joel has lost something crucial. He still has the cracked watch on his wrist. And he's become more rugged. He's become more angry. He's become more self-serving. And so even those little moments where, for example, he catches up with a guy and just breaks his arm, right? What if his daughter was still around? Would this still be the same rugged man? I don't think so. But it's what makes that lead into meeting Ellie all the more beautiful, because it's almost as if Joel has got something back that he once lost, even if it's not the same person. And again, it goes to that almost selfishness where he's making Ellie fit this mold, if you will, of someone he lost and treating her the same way. And that really defines their relationship. I mean, the Joel-Ellie banter back and forth throughout the entire game is fantastic. What I did recognize on my return, a little slow moving here in the opening parts with Tess. I know that's become a complaint with the game, and some people like The Last of Us Part 2 because it really comes out the gate strong, but I think setting a tone is so important, so sometimes that can overrule like the walking segments and whatnot, and I personally didn't even find it boring. What I love about The Last of Us Part 1, it reminds me a lot of what I say about A Plague Tale Requiem, A Plague Tale Innocence, is like every scene in those games I think is important and used intelligently. So same thing with The Last of Us, like every scene, every moment, every bit of gameplay, no filler, it all must exist. And the only bit of, I would put this in quotes, filler content was kind of put as DLC with the Left Behind part where Joel gets hurt, he gets a pipe through his abdomen, and you get to play as Ellie in that kind of month window, getting supplies, learning more about her, learning more about the bite, that type of stuff that they didn't find super necessary because, again, it's about keeping the game moving. So all you needed to know about Ellie was she had a bite on her, she didn't get infected, it's weeks old, and they are going to use her for a cure with the Fireflies. It's like, okay, mission set, go. And now it's about the selfishness of humanity and the awful things they'll do to survive, to torment Joel, to torment Ellie, to get what they need, to use her as a bargaining chip. And it's just a rip-roaring ride. So to me, that steady build-up and learning about these characters is so necessary. And I think there's enough gameplay moments where it holds itself up well. And I do think the test section is kind of underrated. Like, she's posed as a key character, and then that's it, man. Goodbye. See ya. So, I love the story in this game, man. And I'll talk more about the ending later. But let's get into the gameplay. It's funny, when you go back to the gameplay in this game, you think, oh, standard third-person shooter with crafting system and upgrade system with the supplements you get. You know, what's so fascinating is this was, to me, one of the first games to really start bringing all of those together in a meaningful way. Nowadays, every game has crafting. Every game has it. But when The Last of Us came out, you had this tight third-person shooter with really fine-tuned mechanics. You know, like when you aimed with Joel, like this guy is not the sharpshooter, so you could see like the shakiness of his shot. I love that type of stuff. There was a visceral nature to the melee combat. So you had this polish that was above so many games at its time. And then you had this crafting system where you'd find little pieces of a shiv or a Molotov cocktail with a rag around the environment. And just on the fly, you'd pull out the backpack and start putting stuff together. Like, I can only hold 3 shivs. Okay, there's 6 clickers in here. I gotta be wise with these. Okay, there's a group of them there. I need a Molotov. Those moment-to-moment decision-making parts of the game are really what carried it as well, I feel. It's what made it so much more fun to play. But there must be like a descendant in my bloodline that loves fist fighting because, like, for example, when I'm running around GTA, like sometimes I'll just like shove a civilian. I'll be like, all right, like, put him up. Let's go. Let's do this. I don't know why. I think it's so funny. And in this game, I love the fist fighting because it's just haymakers, just throwing haymakers endlessly, and just the sound effects and like Joel's like, ugh, like just throwing the biggest bombs of his life, man, with a vengeance. But it's when you get close to an object, when you get to a wall and you put their head into it, when you get to a countertop and you slam them into it, when you just, that natural happening. Even nowadays, I'm like, no games are really doing it this smoothly, right? No games are having you like bounce against the wall and there's these different options you can take once you put them there. No, like it's a super high level of polish. So to me, it felt meaningful. The progression felt meaningful, even if it was kind of hilarious. Just Joel's grabbing every multivitamin in vicinity and it's just like, blah, 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 blah. Okay, I'm way stronger now. Love it. But you know, the game has to have progression. And I love the tub-based nature. It wasn't blown as wide open as The Last of Us Part 2 is. It was more tighter, confined and you look for a couple of collectibles, a couple of things to craft with, and you move on. So I just enjoyed the gameplay, loved the story. Let's talk about the ending and then we'll talk about factions afterwards. The ending to this game, I think, is one of the best ever done. I remember having a big problem with the ending because I didn't really think I fully understood it, because I said, why would he do this? Why would he save Ellie and ruin humanity? This is so dumb. Like, it's so dumb and self-serving. Why would he do it? And almost a naive thought process, right? Like, why would you not make the sacrifice for the greater good? And I was angry about it. And then on that second playthrough, I was still kind of annoyed. I'm like, I don't know, man. Like, this is so stupid of him. Why would he do it? You know, time passes, discussions are had, and you just realize that's the point. That's the point. Back to what I said earlier, the selfishness of man captured perfectly. Like, you could save humanity for the life of one little girl, but he already paid his dues 20 years ago. He's not about to do it again. And can you blame him? Can you blame him? I don't know. I don't think you can. I don't think you can, right? And it elegantly asks that question, what would you do if you were in Joel's shoes? And I'm just like, I don't know. You feel awful either way, and they capture it so perfectly. And it's why I say those slow-moving parts of, I put in quotes, slow-moving parts of the intro are so perfectly done, because I think they're necessary. It creates context for that very end moment of the game, and it all ties together beautifully, right? It tops every moment in the game because it leaves you with that lingering message, and that's what the best games do. They leave you with something to think about. That's what impact is, man. And that's why, I'm not going to go on a whole rant, but that's why I was so frustrated with The Last of Us Part 2, is I felt like the message was so obviously poor here and solvable in a moment. Whereas with The Last of Us 1, it's a journey building up to that message. And when it's delivered, you're like, can you blame the guy? That's how I feel about it personally, but I just adore the story. I adore the ruthless nature of its world. Its gameplay is visceral, and it's on the fly, moment to moment decision making. Just so much fun. And then to top it all off, so you're going through the game, you're like, all right, I'm going to do the story, I'm going to get the trophies. And typically you think you're done, but this is again where I just think Naughty Dog is so awesome, is they put out this multiplayer mode called Factions. And this was like one of the last times we got that single player and multiplayer hybrid. Because game development is so complex, because it's so expensive, you typically get one and then the other way later. And I gotta say, I get it, but I do miss those days. Like on the PS3, the 360, the almost mandatory built-in multiplayer. And it's rose-tinted glasses, don't get me wrong, right? Because when you look back at it, there was a time period where all of us were like, just give us single player. You don't need to force the multiplayer. But now you look at it and there's such a charm to it, because it was unnecessary, and because most games didn't fit it, that they were just like, all right, we got to do something here to build a community around this. And that's what they did with Factions. It was this survival-based multiplayer that, you know, in the face of Call of Duty, running around, Battlefield, you're running around. Last of Us Factions, you're just crawling around, and, you know, getting a handful of kills was a real big, good feeling. And you're scavenging materials that are going to go back to the respective factions that you can submit them to. Like, the metagame within Factions just was chef's kiss. It was such an unnecessary component of the game. You remove all of that, you just leave us with this campaign. Maddie is fine, Maddie loves it, we're good to go. But you add this on top of it all, and I just don't know how you can't walk away from it and be like, that's like one of the best video games ever made. It did everything right in its single player. It left you with a message. It had defining gameplay for its time and gameplay that holds up. And on top of all that, you got really unique multiplayer. You know, like I talk about Dead Space 2 sometimes. Like, Dead Space 2 is one of the most expensive games ever made. And Dead Space 2 had a phenomenal campaign. It's my favorite in the whole trilogy. Well, I'll have to think about that. I think I go back and forth on the first one and the second one. But for now, I'll just say, you have this amazing story, And then they had this really cool multiplayer where you could play as the Necromorph, so you could play as Isaac. And I just, that era was so underappreciated. And it stinks because that's the crummy part about multiplayer is you can just never get it back. Like, the communities are dead. You can just never get them back. And so, yeah, man, just wonderful. BioShock 2. BioShock 2 is another one that just popped in my mind. BioShock 2 had unnecessarily good multiplayer. So the Factions just reminded me of that era too. And it's still active. Like, you can go play on your PlayStation 4, but I really appreciate that they went to this extra length. And now we're waiting on this new Factions game from Naughty Dog, and I'm just keen to see what it ends up being, right? It was kind of talked about as this side project coming for The Last of Us Part 2, and I think it's been so long now, you got to imagine it's just its own game. It's going to be live service probably, that'd be my guess. But awesome series for the most part, and I'm really looking forward to checking out the show, and I'm just happy to be able to sit down and talk about the game. So that's everything I had to say about the story, gameplay, factions, all that good stuff left behind. And yeah, let me know what you're thinking in the comments down below. Certainly looking forward to seeing your thoughts. Take excellent care of yourselves, and I'll see you around in the next video. Peace out.